Welcome to Classic Queens Podcast. I'm Kathy.
And I'm Jess.
And we are part of Brock University's Department of Classics and Archaeology 3P98 Engaged Leadership in Classics course. And today, we're going to talk about my favorite woman of all time, Livia Drusilla.
Only way I could get you to do this, because she's phenomenal.
She is. Livia Drusilla, she was the first wife of the emperor of the Roman Empire, Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, who we know pretty much as Augustus today. They are the first power couple. They are like the Clintons of ancient history. So she was born January 30th in 59 BCE into a very distinguished political family, the Claudians. Their patrician lines were very powerful because her father was adopted by a guy named Marcus Livius Drusus, who was a descendant himself of one of the oldest and most powerful plebeian aristocratic families.
Ooh.
Lots of power, lots of money.
Yes. And then she was married to Tiberius Claudius Nero, who was a praetor in 42 BCE, who initially supported Julius Caesar in the civil wars, but he then switched sides to support Caesar's assassins, Brutus and Cassius. And then when that went sideways on him, he threw his support behind Mark Antony in the civil war against Octavian, who was not only the great nephew of Julius Caesar, but also his adopted son and heir apparent, and soon to be the first emperor of Rome. So he's always back in the wrong horse.
Not a good choice.
Not the best decisions.
No.
So then in 42, when she and Tiberius had their first son, also called Tiberius, because the Romans have 6 names, and if it's going to be your dad's, it's going to be your dad's.
That's it, yeah.
And he, Tiberius, would eventually become emperor after Augustus. When this all happened when Livia was 17, and then at the end of the Civil War, and being on the losing side, Livia and her husband Tiberius and son Tiberius squared, were forced into exile, avoiding pursuers, and so they had to live a bit of a rough life. They were able to return to Rome, but only after Octavian had issued a general amnesty, so it was like, it's okay, you can come home now, to all of those who opposed him. Livia and Tiberius had almost no money and very little chance to recover the property that was confiscated prior to their exile. So they were living rough.
Yeah.
Well, rough for the...
Well, you know, Octavia, like his uncle Julius Caesar, was smart enough to recognize that he needed the support of old, distinguished families if he was going to be successful. And it was no skin off him to say, you know, I forgive you. Yeah. But he's not going to give you back your stuff.
No. He gets to keep that.
He needs that money.
He knows he needs to accumulate power before he can make directions.
Yeah. Okay. So in 38 BCE, she's about 6 months pregnant, right, with her second son. And she and Tiberius go to the 24th birthday party of Octavian. Apparently it's to celebrate the shaving off of his beard.
Woo!
Now, keep in mind, she has an impeccable aristocratic pedigree. She's young, she's attractive, she's very witty, and she's a very sharp mind. Now, Octavian himself was married to this woman named Scribonia, and she was a member of the Pompey family. So, a little bit of Roman history. Pompey and Julius Caesar fought against each other. Pompey lost, Julius Caesar won. So she wasn't really much of a political asset anymore, this Scribonia. No. And they weren't close as a couple. And the ancient writer Suetonius actually points out that Octavian was enthusiastically pursuing many other women and had quite a reputation for seducing senators' wives so he could find out what the husbands were thinking.
Well, I mean, how else are you going to get that elite information?
Exactly. So, in spite of her being 6 months pregnant, Octavian is enthralled, and Livia becomes his latest lover. He falls in love with her. Apparently, she had no issue with it. Evidently, her husband's political career going nowhere, and Octavian is young, wealthy, and very politically powerful, and his star is on the rise. He's got a lot of confidence.
I'd go for that too.
Yeah. He needs her background and her connections. Again, looking for the support of those Republican families to create a stable empire. But their marriage gets a little bit bizarre. It's a bit of a scandal because Octavian goes home and basically he says to Scribonia immediately after she gives birth to his daughter Julia, want a divorce, citing he can no longer tolerate her bitter personality.
Excuse him?
Livia's husband Tiberius, surprisingly, not so much, obligingly divorces Livia.
Of course.
Around 39 BCE, she and Octavian become betrothed. But they need a ruling from the College of Pontiffs. Again, Octavian belongs to this, so I don't really think this is going to be a problem. But they need this ruling because under Roman law, children belong to their fathers. So they had to ascertain that Livia was pregnant with a child conceived by Tiberius to establish the child's paternity. So once that's given, Livia moves in with Octavian as his beloved betrothed, and on January 17th and 38th, 3 days after she births her second son, Claudius Drusius Nero, she and he are married, and the baby and Tiberius Jr. are packed up to move with Tiberius Sr.
Yeah, their marriage, it was an opulent one, wasn't it?
Bit of a soap opera beginning to it, right?
Soap opera beginning, and then the most opulent Olympian-style theme and food and extravagance all the way up for this big wedding. But then, the cherry on top of all of it for the true soap opera ending, Tiberius Sr., her ex-husband, had to be the one to give her away because she had no other male status man and few male relatives.
Like her dad was dead. Yeah.
Like, imagine your ex being the one to have to take you down the aisle and it just be fine with you. Oh.
A rumor has it, I can't remember if I read it in Adrian Goldworthy's book or if it was in Suetonius again, that at the party somebody actually pokes at Tiberius about, oh, aren't you going home with your wife? Some tittle like that. That's how sensitive it was at the time. That people, God. It didn't go unnoticed per se. So,
but come on, the emperor forces you to get divorced, and then you have to show up and walk your wife down the aisle to him. I mean, not an aisle, obviously, but you have to do that. Oh boy.
And even furthermore, that probably Livia was maybe running up the aisle.
Livia's just like, I'm on my way.
I'm marrying up. Yep. So anyway,
oh God.
But on the surface, she was the perfect wife.
Yeah.
She served very well as a moral, as a front. He had this moral legislation and marriage laws. Augustus, because we get to call him Augustus now, in 27 BC, they give him the title Augustus. Yes. He felt the decline of Rome was due to lax morality of its citizens. He enacted a number of marriage laws, the Julia de Maritandis Ordinibus, and Lex Julia de Adulteris, so a marriage law and a law of adultery.
Bold.
Yeah, exactly.
Bold.
So the first marriage law, group of laws about marriage, was to encourage the morals of the upper class of the Romans, meaning the elite Romans, because nobody cared about the lower levels.
Well, yeah.
As well as the population. He encouraged marriage, but Roman citizen to Roman citizen.
Well, yes.
And he wanted lots of children. And he actually encouraged women, pushed it on the books, that women should have at least 3 children, sons preferably. And if you were marrying age and celibate, or you were a young widow and you were refusing to marry, you could be prohibited from getting your inheritance or denied entrance to public things like games.
Ridiculous.
Exactly. So,
I know your husband just died, but get back out there now.
Yeah,
drop
there,
some
girl.
babies for
you
us.
go, right? So it gets even better because the adultery laws establish adultery as being a public or private crime. And if you were convicted, you risked exile or confiscation of property. So again, given that not only did Livia turn a blind eye to her husband's prolific philandering, which we know about from Suetonius again.
He made it a public and private crime. Sir,
Yeah.
the hypocrisy.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
And the best part about it is like, not only was Livia on the surface chaste and being seen to weave all of his clothes, she wove all of his own clothes. She made all this
Well,
toga.
that's what the wife's supposed to do.
Yeah. But
In this
according to source, she actually vetted and procured his bed partners.
Jesus.
So he was violating his own adultery laws, and she was helping him. So
Oh my
they're
God.
both in violation.
Yeah, they're both in violation, and she's just like, gotta make sure they're not better than me, I guess.
I have no idea, because here's the deal. One of the laws is that, as we know, with children being important, as a Roman male, if your wife did not give you children, because it's always the woman's fault, he could divorce you. And Livia and Augustus never had any kids. It was believed she had one stillborn, but there is never in the record any sign of her pregnancy. And under Roman law, he could have divorced her. He had no political reasons at this point to hang on to her.
I mean, part of me's like wondering, because he only had like one child.
Yeah, Julia
before, if maybe he knew he was the problem, and so he was
come on.
just like,
Men never know they're the problem on
well,
this
I
issue.
know
It's
they
always
never
the
know
woman.
they're the
Back
problem.
then, it was
but,
always
like,
the woman's
she already
fault.
had 2 sons. Like, clearly she's not the problem.
Who knows, right? But we could probably go down
Oh, we
that
could go down
path, yeah.
so many rabbit holes today.
But, people could say, well, it spoke to the love and mutual respect that they had for one another.
But
I
not
think
for
it's
the
the thing-
laws they make.
I think that they just had a really good working relationship.
Yeah.
And he relied a lot on her, and she relied a lot on him. He was able to get what he wanted. She was able to get what she wanted.
Yeah.
And it really, really worked. And they were a good public face.
Yeah,
for the Roman people.
Good, strong front for the Roman people.
Exactly.
And it works really well for each other.
They were, yeah.
Yeah. And, on the surface, because she is the perfect wife, perfect facing wife on the surface. She's always by his side, traveling with him to the provinces, being the face of all of his propaganda. And she had tons of money, and she used it for public building projects, making Rome beautiful. She dedicated an altar to Concordia, the goddess of
Concordia.
Concord, just keeping everything even, right, orderly. And she made this in the portico of the Temple of Concordia. Yeah. She funded so many charities, and she was known to pay dowries for young women whose families couldn't. She was the mother of the country, as Augustus was the father. And in modern times, we would say that she's the perfect first lady of the United States. She's smiling for the camera, working to support her husband's policies, not overshadowing him. Sort of similar to Michelle Obama, who's a Harvard-educated lawyer. She spends her time in office maintaining a moral high ground, empowering girls and women, and serving the marginalized. She's such a they're both powerful women. There are more differences than similarities, but just both in well-educated, intelligent women.
Yeah, I can kind of see Livia standing in downtown Forum with a spade, turning it over for a new tree. I could honestly see her doing that.
Yeah.
But she was no Michelle Obama.
Yeah.
She had a serious hankering for political power. She desired it. Yeah. She advocated it. She shared in the honors accorded Augustus. He was thought to be a deity or a god incarnate, and was identified very much so, particularly in the provinces. They call that the imperial cult.
Yes.
She received the exact same treatment. Mm-hmm. She was represented with the attributes of the goddess Juno and the goddess Carves, and her image. In 16 BC, she was the first woman on a coin in the provinces.
Wow.
She's wearing the crown of Carves, which becomes the symbol of the Roman empress, as much as the laurel crown becomes the symbol of the Roman emperor.
Yeah, that's very cool. So Juno was the goddess of marriage, like Hera in Greek, and then Charis was of fertility and farming. So very powerful woman. But something else very powerful that Livia was able to do is the right to administer her own financial affairs without a guardian, which is unheard of power. She maintained properties in Gaul, Jerusalem, and Egypt, and she had the right to have her own statues erected. And she was endowed with a grant of sacrosanctus, which meant that by a sacred tie, she was too valuable and too important to be interfered with, which is characteristic only of the tribune's office, one of the hardest offices in Rome to get into.
You know, she had tremendous influence at court. Ambassadors who came to see Augustus would see her first, so she would advocate for them. Cassius Dio, a historian, said that Augustus would actually write down lists of things to be discussed with her and take notes of her replies for later. She had her own circle. Political careers were made and broken by her. She advocated for people, and she advocated against people. She had a lot of power.
Yeah, she was launching political careers, which again sounds a lot like the not too far off former First Lady Hillary Clinton, who was powerful in her own right. She was Yale educated, and in her native state of Arkansas, where she was the first lady, she had tremendous advocacy programs for women and children. The National Law Journal twice has listed her as one of the most influential lawyers in the United States. As First Lady in the White House, she advocated for healthcare reform, created children's health insurance programming, among many others. She became the first female senator for the state of New York and the first First Lady to hold elected office. She ran for president twice and served as Barack Obama's Secretary of State, and she's even a published author since 2020. And she served as the Chancellor of the Queen's University of Belfast. Very impressive woman, very similar to Livia.
Mm-hmm. But, you know, the similarity doesn't end there because not unlike Hillary Clinton, Livia had her critics. Mm-hmm. You know, the historians of the past were kind to her. Tacitus referred to her as the evil stepmother. She was constantly accused of pushing her sons into power, particularly Tiberius, as Augustus's heir. He also wrote, Tacitus, that she convinced Augustus to banish his last living grandson, Agrippa Postumus, saying that Livia got such a hold over the aging Augustus. And he further blames her for withholding the news of Augustus's death from the Roman people until Tiberius could reach the house from where he was stationed to manage the message. And, you know, the historians also intimate that she was responsible for his death. Tacitus also claims that the first criminal act of Tiberius's reign was the murder of Agrippina Postumus at the behest of Livia. Tiberius out of fear and Livia out of hatred. But, you know, in the wake after Augustus dies, we know that he valued her because in his will, she continued to accumulate power. In his will, Augustus names her Augusti by adopting her into the Julian clan.
Amazing.
And as a priestess of the cult of the deified Augustus, she was given a lictor or a special bodyguard. Mm-hmm. An altar was to be commemorated for her adoption, and she was supposed to formally receive the title of Mater Patriae. Now, I say supposed to because Tiberius vetoed everything.
Of course he did.
Yeah, he didn't want to be emperor, and he didn't feel that women should have it and that they should be kept in bounds. But
then he runs away to Capri.
Yeah. But he gave her the right to sit with the Vestal Virgins, as we know, who were a very elite group of women who got to have VIP seating at games and were sacrosanct in themselves. But it was obvious that she wanted to continue to rule. She held many formal audiences and recorded them in the Acta Diurna, the daily public records, and she signed agreements with vassal states alongside Tiberius.
As she should.
Mm-hmm. However, the shoe kind of drops because when she and Tiberius erected a statue to Augustus, she had her name inscribed above the emperor, and historians say that eventually Tiberius got so fed up with her political interference that he retired to Capri. And when she died,
because she's doing his job, she's doing it better than he can.
Well, who knows about that, right?
Well,
she retired when she died, when she died in 29 CE at age 84. He sends his nephew Caligula, yes, that Caligula, to do the eulogy. But she kind of gets the last laugh because after he dies, and Tiberius vetoes even all her honors after she dies. But in 42 CE, when Claudius, who takes over after Caligula is assassinated, when he becomes emperor, he gives her all the honors. And Claudius deifies her, naming her the Divine Auguste.
Go Claudius.
And her image was to be conveyed in all public games in an elephant-drawn chariot. And she was granted a statue beside her husband,
As
Augustus,
she should be.
in the Temple of
Yes.
Augustus. So
Good.
there you go.
Yeah.
In my opinion, the first major power couple that the world ever saw.
And she set up so much for later
She did.
for later
really,
women
really
in power.
did. So
Yes. So thank you for listening to the Classics Queen podcast. We hope you've enjoyed. This will be our last one for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for listening.
Yes, and we'd like to thank, again, the Brock Department of Classics and Archaeology, particularly our mentors and supervisors, Professors Nadine Brundrett and Michael Carter, for all their supervision. Thank you very much, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.